Okay, year 13. So this is the second of our series of mini revision videos for the American course. And this one's going to focus on the second specification point in theme 1, a reminder about changing political environment. And that specification point is the influence of Roosevelt. So you need to understand the importance of this president who was elected in 1932 and the impact he had on American politics, on American life, and how vital he was to changing the way the president was viewed among the population. To give us our basics, we can see with a map here just how popular the vote was for FDR in the 1932 election. The blue states, all Democrat states, won by FDR at the election, 472 electoral votes as opposed to Hoover's 59 electoral college votes. So FDR is hugely important, was hugely popular when he was elected in 1932 and came in during the biggest economic crisis in American history, 25% of the workforce unemployed, and this crisis had to be solved, and the decisions he makes influences American politics for years to come. So he's regarded as one of the greatest American presidents because of his actions and because of what happened and the decisions he made and the people he got back to work, for example. But he also has a massive influence after he's gone as well. So a little bit of FDR as president. First of all, if we just quickly have a little bit of a look at who he is. FDR, one historian described him as part lion, part fox. To go with his personality of, in some ways, very persuasive, very charming, very likable character, wanting to talk to people, and then other people saw him as quite niggly, quite aggressive in making decisions and ready to pounce on any mistakes, and quite aggressive in his nature on trying to get things done. We know that FDR surrounded himself with experts, and he widens the power of the White House and the people who work as advisors in the White House. And in the lead up to the 1932 election, a lot of people looked at his role as the governor of New York at the end of the 1920s, where he'd received a very positive reception for some of his policy making, especially when the Depression started. In New York, he took really quick action to help poor and unemployed people get through those troublesome years before the election. So he did have a good reputation leading into the election as well. Now, when he was elected, he promised a New Deal, and with his New Deal, FDR was granted special powers. These special powers were as if it was in a war situation, and it meant that he could get the government involved in a more extreme way than they had done, or how they would usually pass laws. So the government was now making decisions for states, stepping in on a national level, which did receive some criticism, but he was now trying to interfere across the states of America and trying to intervene to make sure policies were being made that would help the country get out of the Depression. This New Deal provided government help, and that provides or sets the scene for people seeing it as a priority of the government. You need to step in and help people when they are in need. Now the government saw it was the responsibility of the welfare state. So Hoover had promoted rugged individualism, where people work hard and they achieve their success by working hard, and the government doesn't interfere. The government allows people to be successful and make their own success. This is a change of policy where the government now sees it as their responsibility to step in and make a difference. The final thing to talk about with the New Deal is we remember them for the alphabet agencies, the many different policies that FDR brought in were all abbreviated with different letters. That's why they're called the alphabet agencies. For example, the AAA was the agency that tackled farming. The NRA was to try and increase business production. There's lots of different policies, but you just need to know that those policies targeted all the different areas of the economy to try and help. And eventually they did help America get back on its feet from the Great Depression. So what we're more interested in, though, is actually FDR's influence as president of America and what difference did he make to the presidency during his time, but also afterwards. First thing we need to remember is FDR was very confident, and I said about part lion, part fox, but the main reputation he does get is his charisma shines through. He was confident, he was charming, he was persuasive, he was able to get things done. And that's going to be seen as something that a lot of people look to for their presidents in the future. Maybe in the 1920s, we had presidents where we didn't hear a lot from them. A lot of people didn't see them and they were allowed to just get on with their day-to-day lives. FDR changes what you want from a president. And that will be seen with presidents like JFK in the future. FDR also proved that sometimes you've got to work with people you maybe didn't want to, or you've got to be persuasive to get things done. He proved the importance that to achieve your goals, sometimes you need to manipulate and bend the rules a little bit. His first 100 days, he passes 14 major acts, and he's only going to do that by doing deals with people from all sides and making sure he gets things done. And that's how presidents in the future like Lyndon Johnson are going to take that on board. Also, FDR, to get to tackle all the different struggling areas of the economy, farming, businesses, looking at the banks, he realized that the small White House staff was not capable of doing that. Hoover had only had 3 assistants, for example, during his time. So he created, or he expanded, the Executive Office of the President. All advisors for all areas of the American economy and society and life were all now addressed with different advisors, and these assistants and secretaries all became part of this executive office. This made things get done quickly because they are directly reporting to the president. Things get signed off quicker, but also people are being given more defined roles. Rather than looking after banks and farming policy or a range of things, you're looking after a specific thing. That's your job to focus on. It gets things done quicker, but also expands the involvement that the White House has, which future presidents are going to criticize, like Ronald Reagan's going to criticize the amount of government involvement in every area of life. FDR was a president that used executive orders because of the emergency situation of the economy. So he again shows you how the president was now becoming a more authoritative figure, making more decisions, being a shining example for people to follow. FDR also surrounded himself with the Brains Trust, who kind of worked with him. The picture, the top picture there above me is an example of his Brains Trust who helped him make those decisions. FDR also built the importance of media, using those fireside chats, those famous fireside chats, to get his message across. He was speaking directly to people's living rooms. Most people by the 1930s had a radio, and when FDR spoke through that radio, they felt like he was speaking to them, and people were having more engagement with the president than they'd ever had. And this becomes a precedent for presidents in the future. He was the first president to receive letters, sack full of letters, praising him and thanking him for what he'd done. He also worked very cleverly with the media, handing off-the-record meetings, especially during the war later on, where he gives them a bit of information, feeds them information, and that helps the reporting of some of his policies and allows for less criticism, which again is important for the president making a difference. FDR, we know, really got himself involved in all policy making. Even if he wasn't going into the finer details, he wanted to get involved and know what was going on all the time. He received many criticisms about that from people on the right, did criticize him and said that he was turning America into a communist state and by getting too involved. But actually, FDR sets a precedent again, an expectation that presidents should know what's going on in all areas of society. The White House has this huge number of boards, and I've spoken about that already. Also sets a precedent that welfare is now the responsibility of the government. Now people look, in times of trouble, they look for their government to help them. How can they get people their jobs back? How can they support people that who aren't in work? He lays the foundations for what we'd call the welfare state. Welfare state helping those most in need and helping those with insurance benefits, things like that. For example, the Wagner Act in 1935 actually increased the role of trade unions, which had been a thing that had been criticised in the 1920s. Trade unions didn't really have a say. He also sees, we also see the marked end of the WASP-dominated America. The 1920s, politics was straying very to the right. Immigration was criticised. People from all walks of life or from minority walks of life were not receiving great treatment, weren't very recognised in politics. And we see the increase in the amount of Irish, Jewish, Italian people with those backgrounds actually getting involved in politics and having a say in matters, and showing the democratic way of thinking of more liberal and open-minded perhaps in the 1930s. How does it all apply to an exam question? So there's several different exam questions we can look at, and we've got here. So how far was the economy responsible for the changing approach of the president in the years 1917 to 1945? So we look at how the economy and other factors would have an influence on the presidents, including FDR. How would the economy have an influence on their policy making? So you talk about how the economy made FDR take more of a decisive role, an authoritative role, for example. To what extent were the styles and actions of the president responsible for changes in levels of public confidence? So you talk about FDR's personality, the decision making he made, the fireside chats, how that would increase public confidence, and then you could compare that with different presidents as well. How far did the American people's trust in the presidency change in the years 33 to 80? So how did people trust the president, FDR, his popularity, winning so many elections? What does that say about him? How far do you agree that the media was the main reason for changes in the presidency? So that could be the way the president is elected or the way they run the country. Is it the media? So you could talk about fireside chats there. Is it the economy? Is it the decision making of a president? FDR can come into all of those. To what extent did government policy improve the standard of living in America? So with that question, you'd be looking at what did FDR do, and you can look at other presidents as well, and you look at standard of living and see if FDR's policies correlate with that as well. So lots of ideas there for FDR, but a very important president that's going to have an influence on our presidents in the future.